College football week 8 has so many great games this weekend, some great matchups. We're going to break them all down. Miami hosts Louisville in a surprisingly compelling game for the ACC title standings. And Miami, everyone knows about Miami. They've played the flashiest schedule known to man through their first 5 games of the season. They've already used up both of their bye weeks. Louisville, on the other hand, they're 4-1, and they have a loss to Virginia. And Virginia, traditionally not a powerhouse program, so Louisville can't be good, right? Well, what if I told you currently Louisville has the best defense in the entire ACC? That's right, even better than the Hurricanes that they're about to play. The 2 best total defenses in terms of yardage in the conference will be active Friday night in Coral Gables. So everyone knows about Miami and Carson Beck. He's been the best quarterback in the country so far, or at least arguably. People are talking about the Heisman with him. And honestly, the Heisman is such a narrative-based award that I don't know if we should be talking about the Heisman in terms of that was the best player. It's such a story-based award. Beck is oddly compelling because of how poor he looked at times last year at the University of Georgia. He gets a lot of media coverage and everything. Goes down to Miami and how he looks like a brand new player again. So that's why Beck is getting coverage. His statistics aren't really anything that are going to blow you away so far, but he's very efficient. He's not asked to do a lot for this Miami team, but Beck has not made really any mistakes. He only has 3 interceptions on the season, and he's just consistently a 70% completion player. He will just pick apart defenses. He's not taking many sacks, and he's not afraid to hand the ball off. You're going to see a lot of Charmar Brown and Mark Fletcher in this game, and it's kind of an interesting duo because they truly split their carries. Typically, Mario Cristobal wants to get those guys about 25 carries a game to take the load off Beck, but you don't necessarily know who's going to get more than the other in any given week. And something that I found very interesting about that is they've not really been asked to, either of them have been asked to carry the load very often, except for in one game. So we've got to go back to the Florida game, and that was the last time Miami played a defense of Louisville's caliber. And Beck could not move the ball through the air extremely effectively. In fact, he actually had 0 touchdowns to 1 interception in that game. And as a whole, Miami's offense struggled until the third quarter. It was 13. They only put up 13 points in the first 3 quarters of this game and then pulled away at the end. And if it weren't for Brown and Fletcher, who each had 20 carries apiece, and just absolutely plowed through and just body-shotted the Florida defense to death, I don't know if Miami still has that 0 in the loss column. So if Beck is not able to have that kind of efficient game, he's not necessarily shown that he's able to go to the next level, for lack of a better term, Heisman moment tier yet, but he has not had to because of how good that running game is and how good Miami's defense has been at just absolutely just strangling the opposing offense to death. And it's very complimentary football, and it's complimentary football with extremely talented rosters. So it's a style that may not be able to win you a national title. Like, again, if you play a team that is just otherworldly offensively, it might not be the kind of style that wins you a national championship against them. But it also means that you're a lot less susceptible to blow up games, like we've seen out of a lot of the teams that Miami has played so far. So Miami, I'd kind of argue, has not played a complete team because they played early Notre Dame, which had no defense at all. They played Florida State team that was reeling, and then they played Florida before the bye week where they had no offensive game plan at all and was just relying on their defense to get stops on every single drive. And eventually Miami wore them down. Louisville, actually, a lot less flashy than those teams I mentioned, but they're probably the best team Miami's played in terms of just being an all-around success. So Louisville is pretty much what Miami is with less talented players. So what that does mean is if Miami comes in and they're looking ahead out of this game, they're not taking Louisville seriously, they might show up with a B- effort, a C+ effort, and that will not get it done. So if Miami finally does have that blow-up game, Carson Beck has that game where he throws 3 picks, and they're not able to get the push up front against a very good Louisville front 7, then this game gets pretty scary for the Canes. But notice that was about 6 or 7 ifs to get to that point. Louisville, not nearly as much media coverage as Miami has gotten so far this year. Miller Moss, though, he's had 3 straight 300-yard games in the air, but we have to cap that because while he's passing the ball well over the last month or so, 2 of those were very, very interesting games. So 300 yards through the air against Virginia, well, cool, you lost the game, so it doesn't really matter. And then he almost lost to Pitt while also having 300 yards through the air. So something to keep an eye on in this one is the Cardinals really rely on a run game to set up the pass. A lot of short dump-offs to receivers and to running backs, tight ends in this system. And Isaac Brown so far has been their leading rusher. He's good to go. He'll return to South Florida to face the Hurricanes. And, well, Miami didn't recruit him beforehand, but he is from Miami. And the problem is there's not a second guy in this system that at least is able to go. So both of the other running backs who have played the number 2 role this year for Louisville are going to be either out or questionable for this game. And that's questionable after coming off a bye. So that's typically if he does go, he's more around 50% type of player. So for a running game, Louisville is going to have to rely on Isaac Brown. And he's averaging 7.3 yards per carry, but he's only averaging 13 carries a game against teams with a pulse. So the question becomes, can Isaac Brown carry more of the load against a very physical, very sound Miami defense? Defensively, Louisville just very sound. They get after the quarterback, they create turnovers, and they just make life very uncomfortable for opposing offenses. They spend a lot of time pushing or getting teams behind the sticks, and that is something that is specifically built to beat a team like Miami. Put them back to a 2nd and 13 because you stuffed the run at the beginning on first down, and then you make Carson Beck throw. And, if Beck's on that day, it's not going to work out. Miami's going to get out of here with another win against an impressive opponent. But just maybe that complementary game with a very disciplined defense and an offense that has some question marks but definitely is capable, that makes this game interesting. Personally, I think this game is pretty close, pretty late into it. I think we're in the 4th quarter. We're a 1-possession game, and we're thinking, oh no, what is Miami up to? This may not be good because most of the people don't realize what they're getting with Louisville. They haven't watched a Louisville game yet this year. And Louisville, like I said, they are probably Miami's playing Bethune-Cookman, and that's probably the only team that is more or less talented on paper than the Louisville bunch. Maybe South Florida. I think Louisville, South Florida are probably pretty similar in terms of the personnel they have in terms of their starting 11 on each side, starting 22. But none of the teams that we've said who can challenge Miami in terms of skill have actually have a complete team so far. They each have a very specific weakness that Miami was able to exploit. And now they get to play a complete team that just might not be as talented as them. So in this one, I'm thinking Miami comes out a little bit flat. Louisville gets on them a little bit early, but Miami is just too good. They're going to pull away from this one, and the box score might not resemble just how close of a game this was. pretty deep into the fourth quarter. I'm going to say that Miami wins, but it's 27-17. So, 10-point win. On paper, that looks really good. But if you actually watch this game, you might have a few questions about Miami going forward. But unfortunately for Miami, there's not really anyone left on their schedule that's going to challenge them. Maybe SMU. We'll talk about that when we get there in about 3 weeks. But anyways, on to the next one. All righty. Now we move right into Nashville, Tennessee. So this is the noon game Saturday. LSU goes to Vanderbilt. And Vandy's coming off a bye. LSU played South Carolina last week after their loss to Ole Miss a few weeks ago. Both of these teams are desperate for a win, and a loss here pretty much puts you out of contention for an SEC title this year. And who would have thought that we would have been talking about Vanderbilt seriously in the running for a SEC title to make it to Atlanta? Clark Lee has done a fantastic job in Vanderbilt, and honestly, I think he's staying. I don't think that there's really a reason for him to leave unless just a perfect job comes open. So that's my 2 cents. We'll get into that right now because we've got a game to break down. So I think that this comes down to one question both ways. How do these offenses run the ball? Vanderbilt is one of the best running offenses in the country. They are top 10 if you don't include the service academies in total rushing yards, but they're no slouch either. They will pass to Vanderbilt is one of the best rushing offenses in the country. So you would think, well, maybe that's just all they do. But no, they're not a service academy. They are just one of the best offenses in the country in general. But absolutely, Vanderbilt is looking to punish you every single time that their offense steps out onto the gridiron. And obviously, Diego Pavia is the one that you're thinking about. But Vanderbilt has a stable of running backs that they are going to run down your throat every time they get a chance to. And they were able to run against Alabama without a ton of resistance, which Alabama this year has surrendered a lot in the running game. So that's not necessarily a great comparison because we're just looking at the helmet sticker there, if we're being honest. But LSU, on the other hand, their running attack has been abysmal. So while their passing attack with Nussmeier's third in total yards per game in the SEC among quarterbacks, he's not really been able to count on a running game to help him out. And that is something that you can really tell. If you watch the South Carolina game, that game was never really in doubt, but something that was in doubt was Nussmeier's health. He was limping from the first series onward, and it looked like he was in serious pain towards the fourth quarter, and he had to stay in the game because the game was not over yet. Vanderbilt's going to take advantage of that. Vanderbilt's defense is on the same caliber as this LSU defense, both in the teens to 20s in national rankings, especially against the run, and then a little bit less against the pass. So Vanderbilt is ranked in the 60s against the pass. LSU, I think, is in the 40s. Either way, total defenses are pretty similar, with Vanderbilt being better against the run than LSU is. So this is going to most likely turn into a game of what one-dimensional offense can be two-dimensional in this. So Vanderbilt's strength counters against LSU's weakness. So I don't expect LSU to be able to run the ball. Even though they were able to run the ball pretty effectively against South Carolina last week, I just don't expect that to be there. And then you're counting on Nussmeier, who's very, very clearly injured, to go out and win the game for you. And I don't know if they're going to be able to put up enough points. Then you look on the other sideline. Vanderbilt's going to run the ball 40 times a game, and they're probably going to get, 250 yards on the ground, if you're being honest there. LSU just has not been, they've been able to stop the run, but they're going to be on the field a lot because I don't see LSU offensively being able to stay on the field for long, sustained drives. So this kind of comes down to, do you think Vanderbilt can score? against this LSU offense or defense, excuse me. And I see no reason why they can't. They put up points on Bama in the first half until Bama made a second half adjustment. And it really is going to be Diego Pavia can pass the ball if he wants to. And you're going to see LSU run a stacked box, inviting Diego to throw on them. And I think he has the arm to do it. And as soon as you see that happen, the game's over because LSU does not have the manpower to run non-stacked boxes and actually stop this Vanderbilt running attack, I don't think. So we'll look at it this way. Vanderbilt's a 2.5-point favorite at home in this one. So basically a pick 'em if you take away home field advantage, standard at least. This is Vanderbilt, so who knows how that's factored in. But, I mean, if you flip the helmet stickers, if you put that big Bengal tiger on those helmets from Nashville and you put the big V, the big black V on those helmets from Baton Rouge, you're like, whoa, this is a 2.5-point favored game. What is wrong with LSU? They should be favored by a whole lot more. The only reason that this is even a point spread that people are considering is because of the helmet stickers. Vanderbilt's a much better team, I think, in pretty much every way than LSU, and I think they're going to make a statement win in the noon window. So, revenge of the nerds, and I think Clark Lee's doors keep on rolling. Durham, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, the undefeated Yellow Jackets travel up there to play the Duke Blue Devils. They're both undefeated in conference play, and Duke 4-2 on the season, but are wide open in a very, very interesting ACC conference race. Duke is favored in this game by 1.5 points, so really just to pick them at that point. We've got to look, though, at this Georgia Tech team because I think it really matters what Georgia Tech team shows up. If Georgia Tech looks the way they have looked in previous seasons against Clemson and Georgia, and they treat this as the threat that it is to them, they're going to be fantastic. I think they're going to show up and really put a hurting on Duke. However, we've seen them this year show up kind of lazy. The Colorado game comes to mind. Wake Forest a few weeks ago is probably the last time any of you watched this Tech team. And you really think, like, well, they aren't the team I thought they were when they beat Clemson. And Clemson hasn't looked good since then, so Tech's probably not very good of a team. But this team plays up and down to its competition so much. It is actually kind of crazy how much Brent Key allows his team to play up and down. Obviously, if you watch this team, you know that the entire offense runs through Haynes King. He's the leading rusher, the leading passer on this team. They're going to be very tough. They want to run the ball completely through the competition. So they're looking at Duke's defense, and they're thinking, okay, well, we're just going to run you over. Haynes King, why should I go around when I can go through that linebacker? You're going to have a lot of misdirection plays. You're going to have receivers getting involved in the rushing game, but your main rusher, of course, is Haynes King, and then, of course, Jamal Haynes. So Haynes and Haynes both need to have a good game on the ground. If we're looking at matchups, though, this is by far the best offense that Georgia Tech has played all year long. So this game will be played in the 30s, maybe even the 40s, which is right around where Georgia Tech likes to play. But this is by far the best passing offense that they have faced so far this year. Tech's passing defense is very respectable, so you think that this should slow down Duke a little bit, but Duke is going to score points in this game. It's more about, can Georgia Tech keep up, and can they take advantage of some of the other metrics that we'll discuss right now. So Tech, you got to think, you've seen them so far, they look very one-dimensional if you look at the box score and all of that. Well, that's not exactly true. So Duke has a very good rushing defense. So that's going to be the main matchup that people are going to focus on. Can Haynes King and Jamal Haynes move the ball while running the football on this Blue Devils defense? And that's not the matchup I think you really should focus on. Duke has an atrocious passing defense, one of the bottom 25 units in FBS football. So, Tech, not a great passing team statistically. Haynes King only has 800 something passing yards on the ground through 6 games, which isn't going to cut it. But if you have watched this team, they have been so slightly off on a lot of deep shots. Haynes King has probably missed over a dozen 60 to 70 yard completions where his receiver is schemed wide open and he just barely misses by an inch or two. If one or two of those hit in this game, it's going to be completely flipping the script on its head. And I think that this is going to be the game plan for Georgia Tech. They're still going to run the ball, but they look at Duke's passing defense and they say, well, we can take advantage of that if we execute. So that's probably where a bulk of their offensive strategy, offensive practice has come. Just trying to get King on the same page as some of his targets. Eric Rivers, Malik Rutherford. He's got several weapons that I can't even name because this is a Georgia Tech team with weapons everywhere at the skill positions. And they're very creative in the way they use them. So I kind of think that this is a Haynes King game where he passes for more yards than he runs. And that feels a little off. And I know he's done that several times this year because just by the nature of the position, even when you are a running quarterback first, you do tend to pass twice as much as you run. At least you yourself. You might hand the ball off more than you throw, but you get what I'm saying. And I think that they absolutely find a way to torch Duke through the air. Because Duke is not going to be able to sit back and just wait for Tech to throw the ball. Why would you? The film shows so far that Tech is a rushing team first and foremost. But if Tech is able to hit one or two of those deep shots that they've been taking in these games, they're just missing. This game becomes really scary for Duke really, really quickly. But of course, Duke has the offense. They have the passing offense to score quickly. So I think that this is a game where leads could evaporate really quickly if Georgia Tech is in the lead. From a game script standpoint, I think this is a game that Georgia Tech probably needs to get an early lead in, or things get a little bit scary up in North Carolina. I really think that Tech needs big games from Jamal Haynes, Eric Rivers, Malik Rutherford, other weapons, just to take some pressure off of Haynes King in the running game. But if they can do that, I think that they have a really good shot. I think that the other stat that I want to focus on, besides Duke's passing defense versus what I perceive as just a slightly off in evaluation for Georgia Tech's offense, is the way Duke struggles to get off the field defensively on third down. They're 109th in third down defense in terms of conversion rate. And Tech is one of the 30 best teams at extending drives on third down, very creative. You have to defend a running quarterback. So if they're very economical in the way they treat this game, if it's third and short, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for the Duke Blue Devils to get off the field against this Tech offense. What has been something that's kept Duke in games so far is their turnover margin is +5 versus Tech, who has one of the worst in the country at -3. So if Tech can hold on to the football, I think that they're actually looking really good against Duke. But so far, the statistics have shown that they have struggled at times holding on to the football. So if Tech holds on to the football, I don't think that this is much of a game. If the current trends in that category play out over the 60-minute game, then we might have a much closer thing. Because while Duke struggles to get stops defensively, on third down, they're very good at taking away the ball, and they don't turn the ball over much offensively. So I think Tech wins this. I think they're going to take this game very seriously. If you watched them against Virginia Tech last week, they took their foot off the pedal, kind of in the second half. Virginia Tech drew pretty close in that game, but it was never really in doubt. And the game before, they had a bye between Wake Forest and Virginia. They were sleepwalking against Robbie Ashford in Winston-Salem, and they almost lost. They got bailed out in that game by a ref call. I don't think that's going to happen again. I doubt Brent Key lets his boys sleepwalk through another ACC team with a quality ACC opponent here. So I'm going to take Georgia Tech to win, and they're the underdogs. So I'm going to take them to win outright and cover. So we'll take Georgia Tech to move to 7-0 and keep their playoff dreams very much alive. It's Georgia and Ole Miss. I don't have words to describe how much I am not looking forward to this game as a Georgia fan, because all of the numbers are like, yeah, Georgia should win. But if you've watched this team so far this season, they have supposedly played in 6 games. And they have a 5-1 record in that. But it's more like they've played in about 3, maybe 3.5. This team has yet to put together a solid 4-quarter effort. And I figured that would be something that changed when they got deep into SEC play. And it's just not. I mean, if you watch that Auburn, if we can call it a football game last week, it was really a bailout by the refs. They got Georgia going, sucked the momentum away from Auburn. And yeah, the refs didn't win that game for Georgia, but they absolutely took the momentum out of Auburn and gave Georgia life in that just terrible final sequence in the first half. So I don't know there. We're going to look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has been one of my top-ranked teams all year long, and they are just really effective at moving the football both through the air and on the ground. Kyron Lacey has had a very underrated season, I think, in terms of national scope for the Rebels. And then, obviously, Trinidad Chambliss is the talk of the town in Oxford. And he's been really good ever since he won the starting job after the first 2 games, So, something to look at. This is Ole Miss's second road game of the season, and it's Trinidad's first start in the SEC. So completely different environment than playing at home. And if we look at the first road start for Ole Miss, it was against Kentucky in week 2, and that was a game where Kentucky really kind of shut down Ole Miss. Ole Miss did not look nearly as effective as they've looked at home most of the season. And one of that is, do you think that they turned a corner since that Kentucky game? Or are they just not really able to play at on the road in SEC play? And Sanford Stadium is going to be a completely different animal than what you saw at Kroger Field earlier this season. Georgia, defensively, unable to get after the quarterback. You can pretty much do what you want to do against this Georgia defense in the first half, and I don't see why Lane Kiffin's team is not going to be able to move the ball against them. There's going to be next to no pressure on Trinidad Chambliss. They're not going to be able to I think that they're probably going to have one of the best third down conversion rates that they've had all season against this Georgia defense, which in the first half especially just seems to not be able to get off the field. And that was not just against Tennessee. That was not just against Alabama. We saw Auburn, who is historically terrible at doing that this season, and they just went right down the field in the first half against Georgia. So, I don't know. The matchup says that Ole Miss should win this game. That all of the underlying numbers, everything tells you that Ole Miss is the better team against Georgia this season. And For some reason, Georgia's ranked 7.5, or is favored by 7.5 in this game. Part of that is the home field advantage. The biggest part of that is how much more talented this roster is on paper. But so far, this Georgia team has just not lived up to their star ratings, their talent ratings that you see. Otherwise, I mean, they'd be the second, third ranked team in the country, and they're just not that right now. If you look at the way this game plays out, I think you really need to see more out of Gunnar Stockton in particular. He's not been nearly as bad as some Georgia fans would lead you to believe, but he's very young. He's very unpolished. He needs to learn when and how to throw the ball as hard as he can versus times when he can just lob it on in there. A lot of times, and at times he's been scrambling for his life. I'm not sure how that's going to happen in this game, if Ole Miss is going to be able to really put the pressure on him. But I don't know. It's a very interesting game. It's a gut check moment for Georgia. They absolutely have to have this one if they want to keep their dreams of making it to Atlanta alive. And Ole Miss, I mean, they've been challenged in several different games this year against quality opponents, but they always find a way to win. That LSU game, they just, converted a third down when they needed it. Arkansas, back when Arkansas was playing like a good team, they found a way to win that game in a high-scoring contest. Ole Miss has just found ways to win so far this season, and they've done it in a bunch of different ways. Georgia, on the other hand, keeps seeing like they find different ways to almost lose games. Like, yes, the talent takes over in the second half and the fourth quarter, but they've not been put themselves in good positions to win. And for that reason, I think I'm going to have to take Ole Miss to win this game. I don't want to, and I really hope I'm wrong about this, but I don't see a way that if you've watched both of these teams play this season, you can sit there with a straight face and say that Georgia's talent on a sheet of paper is the reason that they're going to beat Ole Miss, because the talent has not translated to the field. And the last time I checked, we played this game on grass and not on paper. So maybe I'm just a jaded Georgia fan right now. I understand that these are the good times for Georgia. I remember what it was like in the early 2000s and everything. We have it really, really nice right now. It's just kind of coming down from how dominant Georgia was in the early 2020s, where they had the best roster in America. And no one has a roster advantage like what Georgia used to have. So I think for the second time in 4 weeks here, that some opponent is going to come into Sanford Stadium and hand the Georgia Bulldogs a loss. So that'll be my pick for now, and I really, really hope I'm wrong on that one. We now head west to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for the third Saturday in October. One of the best rivalries in college football historically, and now it actually means something again. Now that Tennessee has won two of the last three of these. Wow, it's been pretty orange in this rivalry. Tennessee's won the last two in Knoxville. Alabama's won something like 35 straight in Tuscaloosa. So can Tennessee snap that streak? They certainly have the offense to do it. Joey Aguilar, Chris Brazzell, probably the best duo in terms of receiver and quarterback in college football right now. Really impressed with what they have done. They have not necessarily faced a defense like what they're going to see in Alabama. So Alabama, if you look at the passing defense for the Crimson Tide, they are one of the best in the conference, one of the best in the country. That being said, they've not faced anything like the Tennessee offense so far, their aerial attack. And this is not a Tennessee team that you can just sit back and be like, okay, we'll rush four, we'll drop our linebackers back into coverage, because Any Heupel-led team is going to run the ball just as much, if not more, than they pass it. And this Tennessee team is just as good at running the ball as they are at passing the ball. So a very interesting kind of dichotomy here. So Bama, fantastic against the pass, not as good against the run, though lately they are proving themselves. That second half against Vanderbilt, last weekend against Missouri, they absolutely shut down a Missouri Tigers running offense. This in Tuscaloosa, the fans are going to be up, and it's a night game. So, where do we even begin? Well, we've already begun. So, I guess we move on to the second look at this. Everyone's going to be talking about the quarterback matchup. So, I've already mentioned Joey Aguilar. He's looked really, really good so far this season. Turned the ball over a little bit too much, but a lot of those are kind of fluky. It's not he's made the bad reads. It's it got tipped at the line. Oh, the receiver just couldn't quite corral it, bounces straight into a defender's arms. So those things are going to happen, but it's not like he's actively making the wrong reads at times. Ty Simpson. If we talked about Carson Beck being the Heisman frontrunner, then Ty Simpson is a very, very close second. He has been very efficient ever since the Florida State game. He's probably been the best or the second best quarterback in college football. He's not going to take the deep shots that you'll see Aguilar take, but he's got weapons all over the field that he is able to throw the ball to. Just find holes in zone coverage. You've got receivers who can beat man coverage, and you've got very creative play calling. We've seen it against Georgia. We saw it against Missouri last week. When you had to have it, you found a way to get it offensively. So, what does this game look like? Are we talking about a classic SEC matchup where this game is played in the teens, maybe the low 20s? Or is this going to be a shootout between two elite offenses where offenses are able to scale over these pretty Alabama's good defense and Tennessee's non-existent defense? And normally it's kind of a bad thing to just like whichever quarterback plays better will win this game. But I think that's exactly what it's going to come down to. So both of these offenses, absolutely elite. Passing the ball, Tennessee has a better rushing offense than Alabama does, especially if Alabama is unable to get Jam Miller to go in this game. He entered concussion protocol in either the late third quarter, early fourth quarter against Missouri last week up in Como. So it kind of just becomes the question, can Alabama run the ball? And if they can't, can Tennessee's pretty mediocre to poor passing defense, only having to focus on the ball through the air, can they give more than they get? And for the most part, what I think this comes down to are going to be turnovers. If Ty Simpson can keep the ball in Crimson hands and not throw the pigskin to that gaudy orange that he's going to be seeing, I think that Alabama will be able to take care of business, even if they don't have necessarily I don't think their offense is nearly as high-flying as Tennessee's. Tennessee's is almost better than – actually, it's not even almost better. It's averaging more points so far than their incredible 2022 defense was. So I think Alabama wins, but this is a game that could go in so many different directions. Alabama could win a close one. Tennessee could win a close one. Or both of these teams could win by multiple scores because of turnovers. It's going to be such a turnover-dependent game for your defense to get off the field. And I think that Tennessee is just more turnover-prone in the way that they run the offense. So that's why I'm going to choose Alabama to win. And maybe that is just the helmet sticker talking. And Alabama has played 3 straight top 10 opponents, or at least in my poll, they were all top 10 when Alabama played them. But I don't know necessarily what to think of this game. So, when in doubt, take the home team in this rivalry lately. So, I want to take Alabama, and we move on to USC and Notre Dame. And rolling right along, another game in that 7:30, 8 o'clock window, USC goes to South Bend to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I mean, both teams absolutely have to have it. It doesn't eliminate USC from playoff contention because it doesn't eliminate them from conference championship contention because this is not a Big Ten conference game. Because Notre Dame, even though they're more geographically located in the Big Ten, is not a Big Ten team, while USC absolutely is. So Notre Dame also, I mean, this is everything for them. They cannot lose a game from here on out, or every one of their accomplishments that they want to accomplish is no longer possible. You cannot be a 3-loss team without a conference championship and expect to make the playoff. So let's move right along. I forgot my clicker, so I can go through my notes here. I don't know what to expect in terms of the winner exactly. I've got a hunch, but it isn't really based off of anything. But I'll get into that later. Jordan Mailata, what a year he's having quietly in Los Angeles. And that's not something you say very often, quietly in Los Angeles. Typically, if you're doing something in the heart of LA, everybody knows about it. And, I mean, you're typically pretty overinflated, but that has not been the case for the USC Trojans this year and how good their offense has been. So, Jordan Mailata, he's the starting quarterback there, almost 2,000 passing yards so far in 6 games. So, he's on pace to have a really good season for the Trojans. 13 touchdowns to only 2 picks through the air thus far. When it comes to running the football, there are very few players better than Wayne Jordan. He's got 88 carries, 576 rushing yards. So do the math. I mean, that's a very good yards per carry of 6.5 so far this year. And if we want to talk about receiving, USC constantly is producing NFL talent. I mean, look at this. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London right now in the NFL, and Mekhi Lemon really reminds me of Drake London. He has been fantastic so far this year. 44 receptions, 6 touchdowns, over 700 receiving yards so far. On the offensive side for Notre Dame, C.J. Carr, no one expected him to have as near as good of a season as he is having. He had to win the job out of training camp. That came down to the wire. He started off against Miami. I think he really proved himself in that loss, and then he went and had a really good game against Texas A&M, and it is not his fault that Notre Dame lost either of those games against, now that we know, 2 of the top 4 teams in the country in the AP poll. And I think that may be doing a disjustice. It might be 2 top 3 teams, depending on how you want to view that. But C.J. Carr has been excellent. 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on the year so far. A little bit disappointing, and it's kind of crazy to say that this is a disappointing performance this early in the season. Jeremiah Love, on 100 carries, he has only rushed for 530 yards. So that's about 5 yards a carry, 5.6 yards per carry or so there. And he does have 8 touchdowns. But this is an offense that has, for the most part, been through the arm of C.J. Carr. Jeremiah Love has gotten better as he is fully healed from his injury from last season. So the deeper we go into the season, I expect Notre Dame to use their All-American running back more and more as the season goes on. But in this game, you look at the defenses, and neither of these defenses are going to light the world on fire in terms of their total yards given up and that sort of stat line. Like, they give up a lot of points, they give up a lot of yards. Where these defenses do excel is they get after the quarterback, they are able to take the ball away. And I think that this game is going to come down to who turns the ball over less. I said the same thing about Tennessee and Alabama, but I think that this is going to be one of the most entertaining games of the season right here in South Bend. And I think both of these teams can run the ball. Both of these teams can pass the ball. I think defensive stops are going to be pretty few and far between in this one, but I don't think it's going to be every single drive as a score. I think that some of these offenses are going to have to work for it. And I think that's what really makes an all-time classic. It's not, oh, they're going to score here. We know it as soon as they step on the field, and you're surprised when there's a stop. Like, yeah, they're probably going to score, but, it's not super surprising. I think both of these teams will get several stops in this game. It's just, can they come up with a big play in crunch time? Let's take a look at that line. And right now, as of Thursday evening, USC is a 9.5-point underdog going into South Bend. And I feel like that is a little bit generous for Notre Dame. USC has looked just as good. They're coming off a big win against Michigan last week. Granted, Bryce Underwood right now is not nearly as good of a quarterback as CJ Carr is, and he does not have the weapons that Notre Dame has. But USC, the defense looked substantially better last week coming off the bye. So maybe, they could continue that coming into Notre Dame. Something is just telling me to pick USC here. I mentioned what's on the line for both teams, that this a loss here would not eliminate USC because it wouldn't take them out of conference contention in the Big Ten. But Notre Dame, this is their season. They have to win out, and this is the biggest obstacle to winning out that Notre Dame will see the rest of the season. I had both of these teams in the playoffs before the season started, and I don't know. Like, you would think I would choose Notre Dame, but there's a little tug in my gut that I feel that the USC Trojans are going to go in and they're going to get a win that many people in the national media are not expecting. And that's a very rarefied air for USC to be in. Typically, it's the exact opposite. People are hyping them up when they don't deserve it. And here, I feel like they've been really flown under the radar most of the season. And for that reason, I'm going to take USC to win this game outright, despite being a 9.5-point underdog in South Bend. I'm going to take them to win and obviously cover. And now we move on to the final game of the year, or final game of this week, not of the year, but in a wild 8 o'clock window with so many rivalry games. This is probably my favorite underrated rivalry in all of college football. The Holy War. It's back. Both of these teams are ranked in the top 25 for a incredible conference matchup here. So, 23 ranked Utah Utes travel to Provo to take on the BYU Cougars. 6-0. They're coming off a wild win against Arizona in double overtime last week. And that doesn't necessarily tell the full story for BYU. They were trailing in this game, and they came all the way back and beat Arizona when it mattered most. Last weekend, though, for the Utes was just an absolute curb stomping of the Arizona State Sun Devils. Yes, Arizona State did not have their quarterback. This game really favored Utah in terms of dynamics because it was played in a monsoon, and Arizona State didn't have their quarterback. So, 42-10, it could have been a lot worse. Devon Dampier did not get to unleash his talents against the Sun Devils as much. But this is a very interesting matchup. So, like I mentioned, 5-1 for Utah, but they have played by far the toughest team that either of these teams have played. Two teams have played so far, and that's Texas Tech, and that game was not close. Utah has blown out everybody they've played except for Texas Tech in a game that they got blown out in. BYU, on the other hand, has played in close game after close game after close game. The Cougars are much more battle-tested than the Utes are. So if this were a close game, the script almost leans more towards Kalani Sitake's group there over Kyle Whittingham. But there's a reason that Utah has not been in many games this year, and that is because they have just completely outclassed their opponents, minus the Texas Tech game. So they haven't needed to dig deep in the end. I think this is going to be the closest game that Utah has played so far. BYU is going to make this at least closer than the 24-point loss to Texas Tech. So you're talking a 2-touchdown game probably for Utah. BYU is a slight underdog, 3.5 points at home. So that would typically mean that Utah is about a 6-point better team is what Vegas would rank them in their models to get to that number. And I think I kind of agree with that number. I don't know if the defense for BYU is going to be able to stop Devon Dampier when it matters. He is a kind of guy who can just take over a game. And I feel like he has that ability significantly more than Bear Bachmeier. So I am going to take Utah. And I think I'm going to take Utah to cover this one. Something to keep an eye on is can the Cougars keep Bear on his feet and not on his back? Because John Henry Daly has been having an absolute year for the Utah Utes. He's only a sophomore, so he is going to be around for at least one more year. He's already got 8 sacks on the season, and this is a front for Utah that is absolutely able to get after the quarterback, and that's something that BYU has struggled with at times this season. So I feel pretty strongly about Utah winning the Holy War this time around in Provo. So let me know in the comments below what you think I'm right about, what you think I'm wrong about for all of these different games. I'm going to go get a drink of water because my throat is killing me, and I will see y'all later.